right, good morning, everyone. A couple of quick updates just to close out 2024. In wetland news, as Brian mentioned, across the board, all of our monitored wetlands around the lake saw great concentration reductions of sediment and nutrients, so both nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as just pure sediment in the water. Once this water gets in our wetlands, these wetlands are doing work. They're typically operational from mid-spring all the way until somewhere in the early to mid-fall range. And when the water hits them, good things happen. This translates to some pretty impressive load reductions. This is all nutrients and all sediment that stays out of the lake and gets sequestered in these sort of natural filters, these natural kidney systems around the lake. In terms of just how much water these systems processed or these systems touched this past year, Coldwater Creek restored wetland. The total inflow was a couple of hundred million gallons. This is up from 2023. So last year, the total for Coldwater Creek was a little bit down. Prairie Creek, about 65 million gallons was processed during this year, and this is down a little bit from what we saw in 2023. Beaver Creek processed about 83 million gallons, which is a phenomenal number. That one is only down about 5 million gallons from last year. And then this is year one for Big Chickasaw Creek, and for it being year one, it saw an impressive 40 or 45 million gallons of water moved. So, these are some awesome totals. When you look at how much water this actually is compared to how much water is in the streams themselves, Coldwater Creek processed as of mid-November. Coldwater Creek had processed the equivalent of about 15% of every drop of water that went through that sub-watershed. Prairie Creek had processed about 6%. Beaver Creek had processed 3 or 4%, and then Big Chickasaw had processed a couple of percent. We expect these numbers to go up next year in terms of the amount of water we're moving. We expect the nutrient reduction efficiencies to stay similar. Right in that, depending on the time of year, you might have 50% reduction, you might have 75, you might have, nearly complete reduction. It just depends on what the plants are doing and what the microbes in those wetlands are doing. And those are all tied to the season. But overall, the concentration reductions are phenomenal. Next year, we expect Coldwater Creek. We've done some modifications to some of the berms over there at Coldwater Creek. We expect the totals to be able to be a little bit higher over there. Prairie Creek, massive renovation is underway on the inflow to Prairie Creek. It's not going to be something that you'll see when you're standing in the wetland, but the pump station is down the road adjacent to the covered bridge there. That pump station is getting cleared out. There's been a lot of sediment that's built up over the years. And this is just a natural thing that happens with these pump systems. The inflows need to be kind of modified and fixed up from time to time. So Prairie Creek, that system is being dug out, and there's a sort of almost like a sump system being installed. It's like a basin that's going to get put in right there at the front one. It'll be underground. It'll be like a sort of a giant concrete basin. That'll allow water to settle out some of the heavier particles that damage pumps and things like that before it ever gets to the wetlands. So that's a positive thing. Prairie Creek, when that system was first constructed, over a decade ago now, when that system was first constructed, it was moving potentially, we monitored values anywhere from 1.25 to 1.5 million gallons a day. Over the years, those numbers have sort of gone down a little bit year after year after year. And what we were seeing this year was we were sitting at about, on a really good day, 500,000 or 750,000 gallons a day. And that was kind of what that system was capable of doing, because the pumps needed to be kind of retrofitted, and some of the inflow items needed to be cleaned out and updated. So we expect this year to get those totals back up to 1 million, maybe even 1.5 million gallons a day, which means Prairie Creek, should see great things. Beaver Creek, again, with the pump that's out there right now, moving about 500,000 or 750,000 gallons a day. This is about what that system can do, somewhere in that 80 to 100 million gallons a year. But we're optimistic we can reach that total again. Next year for Big Chickasaw Creek, given that this was year one, the pumping rates were a little bit lower than what we'd like to see. But those pumping rates were low because we were allowing the vegetation to get established, and we weren't even sure we were going to be able to pump water this year at Big Chick. So this is kind of plus 40 million gallons we weren't expecting to see. Next year, that number should be about double. There's 2 pumps out there. This year we just ran 1. Just to allow the system to kind of settle in. So next year we expect, again, that number should be equivalent to Beaver Creek. We should be looking at between 80 and 100 million gallons in that. And as you process all that water, as you reduce all those nutrient concentrations, it translates to real load reductions, and that translates to real water quality impacts. This is the algal biomass data. So this is not necessarily the toxin data, but this is the algal biomass data. And when you look at this, you can see that at present we are in the process of kind of crashing for the year. A lot of the algal biomass is dying back. A portion of it is kind of senescing, where it's going dormant and it's kind of settling into the sediment. And that stuff, those spores and those those hangers on, those will come back in the spring. It's just a question of to what degree they come back next year. Specific to that degree that these algae come back, what we've seen over the last 5-6 years, we've seen a steady downtick in the biomass, and it's not like the biomass is akin to some pristine glacial lake by any means, but it is going down. It is going in the right direction. And what's interesting about these sort of incremental reductions in the biomass is they're translating to really tremendous reductions in microcystin toxin values. So these microcystin toxin values, you've seen this graph 1,000 times, but down there on the x-axis, that's week of the year. So on the left of the screen there, by the way that we're all looking at it, on the left of the screen, that's sort of the first week of January, and on the far right, that's the last week of December. The dotted lines, the one on top, that's the World Health Organization's recreational advisory for toxin contact limit. The one there right around 8 micrograms per liter, that's the state of Ohio's recreational threshold. And if you look at this year, that's the second line, not the dotted line. If you look at this year, we really only had 3 weeks that were above it, and only one of those weeks was really far above that. And that's it. The other weeks just sort of flirted with that line, and they were above it just a little bit. And not that that's a good thing, but you can look at the historical average, and if the lake, gave toxin values that were, concurrent with the historical average, you'd have 70% of the days of the year be above that critical threshold. So this is an outstanding thing. All of that void space you see between the 2 lines, all of the sort of negative void space, that's improvement. So this is great. This line is a little bit lower than what it was last year, which is great, and we hope that the line next year is a little bit lower than this year, and that's what we can do. We can hope for steady incremental improvements, and the way you do that is taking the fuel away from the algal bloom. And it's not rocket science, it's nutrient science, so it's nitrogen and phosphorus. Take that away, and it's got way less to play with. With these toxin values, when you reduce nutrient loads, it's going to be the toxins you see first before the algal biomass. The algae use the nutrients to grow, okay? If they have extra, if they have surplus nutrients, particularly nitrogen, if they have surplus, that's what they then use to make the toxin. The toxins are, I'm going to use the word luxury compounds. The toxins are kind of a luxury compound, and if they have extra resources laying around, they use those resources to build these toxin molecules. These toxin molecules are an adaptation to handle a variety of things. But these algae have been doing this for millions of years, and these luxury compounds, if you can start to take away the nitrogen and phosphorus, you'll see these luxury compounds go down way before the actual biomass themselves. And so when we look at a graphic like this, and you look at, this graphic goes back to this data set began in 2019, fall of 2019 is when this data set goes back to. This is kind of this is measuring biomass rather than toxicity. You can see that our biomass is a little bit less than what it was the year before, and that was a little bit less than what it was the year before that. And you can see the sort of summer seasons in there, and you can see the width of those summer seasons is starting to shrink a little bit. But, you know, to be honest, the biomass does not stand out in the way that when you look at a graphic like that. This is very, very obvious. This one is more of a, yeah, I guess I can see, you know, maybe a 10, 15% improvement, I guess. And that's great, right? But this is biomass, and this is the actual toxin data. And like I said, these toxins are the luxury compounds. In terms of nutrient budgets, you can think about this like a monetary budget. You know, these are you know, trips out to a five-star restaurant. You know, when the bank account is flush, you might have more of those, and then as soon as that bank account is not, those are probably the first things to go, right? The last thing to go would be the things that you absolutely have to have, the biomass to sort of live on. So we're seeing good things, and certainly nobody's got a crystal ball, but it sure helps to be trending in the right direction with conservation practices, because those are the things that keep these positive trajectories going. So that's what I got today. When we come back in February, so I think, Brian, you mentioned January is no meeting on January. When we come back in February, I will have the annual conservation report, the annual wetland report ready, and we'll pass all that out, and we'll get that posted to the LAA website so everybody can see, you know, more specific numbers. With 2024 not quite being done yet, we're still collecting data for the year, and we're still monitoring. So as soon as we get to the end of December, we'll turn our attention to wrapping that up, and we'll get that out to everybody. So we appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Since the Supreme Court has kind of slapped the EPA around about some of their dictatorial decisions, is there any chance that the ODNR might change that advisory level?
So the question was at the federal level. The question was at the federal level. There have been some shakeups with the EPA, and there have been some decisions made. Is there any chance that those federal decisions, those federal you know, things happening are going to translate down to the state level? And the answer to that is
I know you're not a politician.
absolutely. I'm so far below all of those decisions at any level.
Nothing has been said about these.
Not that I've heard. Not that I've heard. Those recreational limits for the state of Ohio, not recreational, those are just advisory limits, period, kind of across the board. Those are set, I believe, by the Ohio Department of Health.
Right.
And Ohio has opted, when you look at contact advisories for toxins like this, there's different sort of flavors of contact. You know, is it, are you contacting the water through recreation? Are you contacting the water by, you know, just walking, you know, wading? Are you contacting the water by drinking? Are you in a susceptible risk class, right? Are you extremely young? Are you this? Are you that? So there's different sort of slices. And the World Health has different slices, and they have different advisory levels. The one that you're seeing right now is a healthy adult recreational advisory. That's what that top dotted line is. The state of Ohio has opted, rather than having 3 or 4 different lines, if you will, they've sort of said, okay, let's try and simplify this. So in any case, whenever you do that, you're going to have a little bit of discrepancy in those 2 lines. Yes, Jeff.
Steve, can I add too that is a topic we have quite a lot of discussion at the restoration. You know, what can we do to, you know, see those numbers move as a world organization, up their numbers? You know, is there something that the state could do to maybe up theirs a little bit? But we're talking with them about stuff, because we are knocking on the door of removing the signs that were posted around the lake. And what is the threshold that allows us to take down those signs? So that's a big topic that we continue to talk about in our meetings.
Yes.
The other thing that I just want to mention, this year I think people saw a lot more vegetation around the lake appearing, which is a great thing. We can't really measure that or put a number on that vegetation and what it's doing to help, you know, clean the water. But we always said, you know, if we can get wetlands started and starting to treat the water and make a dent in those toxins, what will Mother Nature do? Well, I think this year we saw what Mother Nature can do by helping us restore some of those green areas that hadn't been prevalent for probably 10 years around the lake. So we're very excited about that.
So the numbers are really, really good. So I'm wondering, what about on the load itself coming in? Is there a reduction, say, based on, better agricultural processes or practices? Is there any data to support that?
Yeah, so the question was, from a nutrient load perspective, what's actually running into the lake, and do we have kind of long-term records of that? The answer is we do have long-term records of that. There's a station on Big Chickasaw Creek that's been monitoring this for over a decade now. We do an update on that long-term data set. Probably about once every 4 or 5 years, we will look at the sort of long-term loading. That's on the agenda for 2025. Is working with our friends over at Heidelberg University and trying to put that together. But I will tell you that the last time we looked at that about 3 years ago, the numbers since the distressed watershed ruling, those numbers had really improved, and they continue to improve. And we'd seen nutrient concentrations at high flows, which is loading. We'd seen those drop in some cases by 30%. We'd seen them drop in some cases by 50+%, whether you look at it total nitrogen or total phosphorus or total suspended sediments. When we look at those concentration drops, when we look at those loading drops, I mean, they're real. The watershed contribution to the actual lake has dropped tremendously over the last decade. Now, the starting point was incredibly high. When you look, 15 years ago, the starting point was incredibly high. And so to see 50% reductions, that's impressive, and that's unbelievable. And that is a huge hats off to our great producers in this region. They have stepped up in every single way imaginable between nutrient management plans and manure management strategies and all of the edge of field conservation work that's being done around the watershed. I mean, this is a big testament when you look at those watershed estimates and you look at those watershed values. Big testament to our great producers in the region, so hats off to them. But these improvements, they continue to be seen. And what I was saying was, we got a long way to go. But, to see a 50% drop from where we were, that's impressive. And I'm not sure there are too many watersheds that have seen load reductions on this scale in this short amount of time. And so it's a testament to all the great people out there that are all sort of rowing in the right direction, rowing in the same direction. So, yeah.
May or may not be related. I get around the state and different places a lot. One of the negative things I always hear about Red Lake, do you eat the fish out of there? And I say, yeah, I do. There's nothing wrong with another EPA report. And it says that consumption is just pulling up one fish that maybe is limited, that's why it's not fast. But it's the other lakes, the lake has 2 or 3 different fish in that one.
Right.
My perspective is there anything that we've done to test out here?
So the EPA data is extremely accurate. They're very, very sensitive about what we are consuming. So the EPA updates that from a number of different water bodies, whether it's Lake Erie or Grand Lake or Buckeye Lake. They update that for the game fish that people would reasonably have the opportunity to interact with and consume. So I would trust those recommendations. Those do get updated. One of the sort of peculiarities with those advisory updates is most of those consumption updates, they originally came out with regard to things like heavy metals. And so as we start to recognize other harmful compounds, particularly the algal-based, the harmful algal-based compounds, the microcystins, things of that nature, the methodologies for estimating those in tissue, in flesh, from consumption, those methodologies are really fairly young, and they're constantly being evaluated, constantly being updated. And so those advisory limits, like I would encourage everybody that eats fish to kind of just keep an eye on the EPA website, and they know what they're doing, and they're doing all of the tests. But those advisories, they could change in short order in a way that the heavy metal advisories are. We've got those pretty well established. We understand those pretty well. But in terms of Grand Lake, is it safe to eat the fish? Yeah, it's safe to eat some fish. I don't remember what the numbers are from that report, in the same way that it's safe to eat some fish from Lake Erie, but it's probably ill-advised to, have a diet that consists of exclusively 50-year-old catfish. You know what I mean? Like there's a balance. There's a balance there.
But actually, you're more worried about the higher level of the food chain, so you're really more worried about bass and your catfish, right? For bioaccumulation standpoint.
Yeah, bioaccumulation would be the sort of thing that you're focused on. The longer a fish lives, the more chance it has to accumulate particular toxins or metals. And then the higher it feeds on a trophic order. So a predator is going to eat, smaller predators, and then those are going to eat consumers, and then those are going to eat, algae or primary predators. So you're sitting at like a fourth level in the trophic web. If you're a lot lower on that trophic web, you don't have the opportunity to accumulate as much. So long-lived fish that feed particularly high on the trophic web, that's problematic. And that's why I kind of point out, a 50-year-old catfish is not, it's been around a long time, and a 50-year-old catfish is not exactly feeding super low on the trophic web either. And so that might be something to think about. Or, we don't have any sharks, or at least not very many sharks out there. That's sort of the epitome of an apex predator as well. That might be something that you're going to be able to consume safely, fewer of those than you would bluegill, something that feeds extremely low. So
That might be more of a project for the LIA is to figure out how to stop that. That's what I'm saying.
all right, thanks everyone.